Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Breakfast with Bobby. My name is Christina Bloom. I am your co host along with Bobby Clubino. I am a psychic medium, a metaphysical teacher, public speaker, author, podcast host, blah, blah, blah. I have a really long line of things that I do. And if you're interested in any of those things, you can just check out my website at christinabloom.com. And with that, I am going to hand over the microphone to Bobby Clubino.
Good morning. It is a fine day here. We have a very special guest, one of my very favorite people, my mentor, my teacher. He has a laundry list of things, and I'm just going to read something very brief because we would be here all day. As a holistic life, business, and relationship coach, Markus has accumulated over 40,000 hours of coaching celebrities, entrepreneurs, businesses, couples, and individuals for over 20 years. He's the creator of the groundbreaking IRAM, a map for creating conscious relationships, and is the founder of the Relation Shift Academy. He facilitates events worldwide and is a regularly featured expert guest and speaker on podcasts and summits. Using an integrated approach of life coaching, psychology, mindset, alternative modalities, shamanic practices, and meditation techniques, he has changed the lives of thousands by teaching how to transform all your relationships from the inside out. And I'm here to tell you that I am one of those. The IRAM book has changed my life. I am presently in this program right now. And Markus has been so gracious as to come onto our show. So welcome.
Welcome, Markus.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
We've already had a lot of fun and we haven't even started yet.
And consequently, we haven't a clue again what we're going to talk about, so be aware of that.
That's kind of our modus operandi, isn't it? Like we don't know what we're talking about. We just start talking.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It's the way we do it.
It seems to come out okay. Markus called us and said, "Hey, can I be on your podcast?" So I guess we're doing something right.
I guess so.
It looked like fun. It looked like a lot of fun. That was the motivating factor. I was like, that looks like a fun conversation.
Yeah. Well, for me, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Christina had she had one of those near-death experiences like you did.
Oh, okay.
And when she came back, she said, I'm not going to do anything that doesn't bring me joy. So that's why we're here. We're here with you so that we can bring everybody joy. So speaking of that, I think it's worth the conversation if you would tell everybody about your near-death experience and why you are where you are.
Okay. Yeah, it's my whole journey. And I think if I look back in retrospect, this was kind of the basis of my seeking. But around 11 years old, I grew up in Canada. And I don't know, for those of you who grew up in snow, in the wintertime, what we used to do is go out in the backyard, and there was an A-frame swing set. And I was with my brother and one of my friends, and we would dare each other to get up on snow and climb in that metal A-frame swing set and climb across the top. And so we were doing that. And at some point during this process, as I was shimmying across the top of this swing set in the backyard, I slipped off of it, fell, and the hood of my jacket hooked on one of the bolts of the swing set. And I'm not sure, I can't remember the specifics of what my brother and my friend were doing. They might have went off and played somewhere else, but I basically was choking and hung to death on the swing set. So I watched myself slowly die being strangled. So as I was hanging there with the bolt and the hood of the jacket kind of taking me and asphyxiating me to a certain degree, I watched myself go through the death process and just eventually, you struggle, you let go of control. And the next thing I know, I was slowly descending. And for me, it was a very interesting experience. People talk about the tube of light, and they talk about meeting other beings. And for me, no, I went into the absolute darkness, which was the most comforting and beautiful experience. It was like going into a black hole. And I watched myself slowly submerge into this black hole. And I went into the complete darkness of, the natives call it the void in Kundalini teaching and different traditions, you might call it the absolute. But it was this place that was beyond the manifest. And then I went into the space, completely lost personality, and then popped out And when I popped out, I was in another place and I was looking down. Like, that's the best way to describe it, even though it's not really looking down, but I was looking at my lifeless body hanging on the swing set and recognizing, oh my God, I passed. And it was interesting because people always ask me, like, okay, when you get to that place, what does it feel like? Where, like, you've crossed over and popped out, and you're looking at this place, you're looking at reality from this other space. And for me, because I was so young, there was no family members, and I didn't really have an understanding of death. I was about 11 years old. So my experience was this feeling where I had no more, the egoic personality side was gone. So you had your full identity still, and I could still recognize that I was, what the consciousness I was in when I left was the consciousness I was there, but there was clarity. There was nothing in the way. There was no human conditioning. There was no ego personality that was filtering through everything. So there was this infinite clarity and peace. And there was this experience. Someone said, well, did you feel the love of the universe? And I said, absolutely. I felt the most profound experience of connectedness and being part of something far beyond our human perception to even consider. I could feel that experience behind me. And I had this sense that if I had turned around, we're talking about it in this kind of 3D world, but if I had turned around and moved towards that energy, I would have never come back. So someone said, did you choose to come back? And I said, well, it was kind of like a choiceless choice, because at 11 years old, your whole identification is to this relative world. So it's not like I had any understanding of anything else. So I just eventually, after being there and recognizing what's going on and being in this space, which felt like, time, it was timeless to a certain degree, but the feeling of love, of infinite love beyond any human capacity, was that warmth and experience of the universe. And I was there with this full clarity, no egoic personality, no filters, no conditioning left. And I was watching the whole experience from this place of kind of as an observer. And then I watched my father come outside, grab my lifeless body. I can tell you what he was wearing. He was wearing like a black t-shirt. He had his Demorier cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve. He was wearing jeans. He was in bare feet. He saw me. He saw my body hanging on the swing set. He ran out, grabbed my body. And so at the same time of being in this place, I could feel him holding me. I could see him holding me. Plus I was watching from this other experience. So there was a thing where I was fully disconnected from that experience, but I could still feel everything, which was really interesting. And then he screamed at my mother to draw a bath. She drew a bath, and he dunked me in the bath. And when my body hit the tepid water, I felt my body come back. I came back into my own body. And the first thing that I thought was, oh, this is life. Okay. And the next thing I felt was a slew, because at that moment, the chip that separated all the worlds and all the different realities was completely decimated in me. So that chip that keeps us very much wired into this reality, was gone. And I had this full experience of, I could feel all my parents' feelings. I had this psychic experience. I could hear their thoughts. I could see beings come from everywhere. So I was in this extremely expanded space, and this huge awakening. I was like thrust into this awakening, and I came back in the world, was not happy, did not want to come back. And when I came back into this little container, this little body, and this really limited pinhole reality that we had viewed, that's my first experience, was like, okay, this is life. And then I was just baffled by how terrified and how much fear was existing in the room, which made sense. My parents had just, they to revive me. I just passed. And it's funny because people was like, so it was a mystical experience for you. And it was. Don't get me wrong, it was an
Mhm.
incredibly profound mystical experience. But I don't think that was the impact for me. I think the impact was context. Like, for instance, if you've never been outside of the city of your birth, your perception is very much limited to your experience within the context of that paradigm. So
Right.
when you experience non-life in from a different perspective, and then you come back into this little container in this reality, how could you ever see life from the same perspective? Right.
Right.
So if you've never been out of your small town, and you never traveled out of your town, you have no perspective in comparison to something else. So having had that experience where, and this is really what a spiritual experience is, right? We have these openings into this other experience. We taste something, And then we come back and then we're like, okay, now that we have this experience in us that's now alive, what do we do with it? So that was kind of
Exactly.
what happened to me. This thing was now alive. The chip was decimated. Now I had to deal with a full opening of all these faculties, and I didn't know what to do with it at 11 years old. I had no concept of what had happened. All I knew was I was profoundly changed, and I had this obsession almost with understanding the human condition, because what I did recognize is when I came back, that human egoic structure was now present again. So I had the experience of not having that and then coming back into it, which made me deeply a seeker in that moment. In that moment, I became a seeker because now it was like, I want to figure out exactly what happened to me. I have to find a way. Now, I'm not saying at 11 years old I consciously knew this, but I was on the path. Now I had to figure out how to negotiate living in a reality where I could see where everything was opened up, which is basically how my training started. Because as everything opened up, I recognized very quickly that I was distorted and there was lots of fear in me and I didn't know what to do with this. So I went on a path to look through all those different faculties, the energetic world, the physical world, the psychological world, the emotional world, the spiritual world. And I wanted to gather tools so that I could function, because at that point, I didn't think I would ever be able to function in this reality.
Can I ask you a
So,
question about that?
yeah, for sure.
Okay, because I've had a similar experience, and I'm really
Right.
glad that you said that you were angry when you came back, because I was
Yeah,
really angry when I
I
came
didn't
back.
like it.
I didn't like it either. I had this expansiveness that was just
Exactly.
indescribably amazing, and coming back into this, and for me, it was a serious illness, so I came back into a very painful body, and
Okay.
that really made me angry. But the other part of that was that was actually my fourth near death experience. So
Okay.
I had two as a child and then two as an adult. And I wanted to ask you about, okay, so you come back and now you're doing all of this exploring, which I did too, but then having to deal with people who didn't have that expansion on a regular basis. Did you find that frustrating? Do you still find it frustrating sometimes?
This is a common question that people ask me. I'll say that during my childhood, I didn't find it frustrating. In my experience, I internalized it. So because I didn't understand what had happened, and now that everything was opened up for me, and I was dealing with negotiating being a little boy at 11 years old, and that, I mean, puberty and school and all that, but I was also dealing with everything else. I
Mhm.
was terrified to talk about anything that I was seeing, because I thought for sure that if anyone knew the way I was viewing reality, they would put me in a mental institution. So I didn't have anger at the world or people in that experience. It was more like I was terrified that someone would find out there was something wrong with me. And and even though, because I couldn't define, I didn't have any way to articulate what had happened to me. So it was only over the years, the more I learned and the more I studied and the more I was doing self-investigation, that I recognized the amount of information that I was receiving and seeing was just so much different than everybody else's, that of course nobody could meet me where I was.
Right.
So, I mean, I became at very young, I became very, somehow I came to the conclusion that it was unwise to share my experience. And, but then as I developed and I think this is a thing, as I continued to develop in terms of consciousness and awareness and master being able to deal with all these different worlds, I think what happened for me is I have a deep and profound appreciation, love, and compassion for the fragmented human experience.
Oh, I do
Because
now, but
you're like,
initially I did not.
no, and I mean,
Yeah.
I was just terrified, to be honest with you. And I mean, people talk about it, and you know what it's like. People say, "Oh, how amazing," but they don't talk about the integration process of how
Right.
long it takes you to integrate and figure out how you're going to function here. And so I always felt like an outcast. I've always felt like I couldn't talk about what I was experiencing, and when I did, I would either A, freak people out, or they would look at me, you know. So there was no context for any of it. And so that was why, being a seeker, that's why I traveled all over the world, because at that time there was no internet, so you couldn't jump on the internet and ask questions, which I'm not sure is always good anyways, to be honest with you. But
Right.
I ended up with mentors all over the world because I was trying to find someone who could help me navigate this new reality and how I felt. And I just wanted someone to talk to about it, and I wanted to be able to understand what had happened to me. And I mean, people say, well, you understand now. And I'm like, well, I have a narrative about it, and I understand the experience that I had, and I know the ripple effect and how it changed me as a being. But I can't tell you do I really understand what happened? I don't think that that would be wise or
Yeah.
fair to say that I fully understand exactly what exactly happened. I just know that it profoundly changed the way I was going to navigate my reality, and it instantly made me a seeker, and it made it impossible for me to see the world from the old perspective, because having been expanded, like you said, like that, and then coming
Mhm.
back, there's no way you can see the world the same way, which
And
for
there's
me is
no
how
real way to explain it where other
no
people can
real
understand it because
no.
we don't have the language for that.
No, I mean we do our best with this
Yeah.
limited this human language that we have, but I mean ultimately you can't wrap your head around something that's beyond the mind and beyond the human
Mhm.
experience and beyond the relative. We can point towards it, like we can point towards the experience, we can share what we felt, we can see the ripple effect of how it affected you and how it affected me and how it changed our trajectory. But to
Mhm.
be able to fully say I understand fully what happened would be unreasonable and arrogant in
Oh,
my opinion.
completely. I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
But it
So
did
you,
change me. It did change me, and it drove me on that path. And then I couldn't do anything else. I was kind of done. Like, I'm like, this is now what was the all-consuming thing, and trying to figure out how to function. That
Mm.
was the hardest thing from 11 to 20. Those were really rough years for me. They weren't easy because I was dealing with multiple realities and experiences and energetics and beings and psychic stuff and all these faculties. And it was really for me to be able to learn how to navigate that till everything settled so that I could function. And even I have difficulty sometimes even in this modern day functioning, which is why I have so many things in place so that I can actually, function as, relatively normal human being, or normal, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, yeah, so I mean,
I
so
do
it
know what you
was,
mean, actually.
I know you do. So it was I would say it was the catalyst that opened me up to deep inner investigation. And since I didn't externalize it, I internalized it. It was all about I had to learn about how to navigate all of my relative experience, my emotions, my energetic world. And so I went, not unconsciously, but I went about learning tools in each of those areas, because every area has specific tools. The tools that you use for your emotional body are not the same tools that you use for your mind, are not the same tools that you're going to use for your energetic body. They're all related. We're all a holistic being. How your ego and your depth of maturity will profoundly affect how you see your spiritual experience and how you interpret it, which I don't think people in the spiritual world really, really, really honor. If they really understood that
Yeah.
everything is filtered through your relative experience, that's how you're going to interpret everything, then why wouldn't you want to refine your psychology so you could be as clear as a being as possible, so that your interpretation and your experience of your spiritual world can be as mature as possible. And that's what I find in the spiritual world. There's a lot of immaturity because people haven't done the inner work. So
Right.
my inner work wasn't done out of curiosity. My inner work, all of the work I did was out of survival, to learn how to
Amen to that,
function.
brother.
And you know that because when you're forced to do it, you're going to have a different experience. It's not a weekend thing that you're interested in. It's curious. It's now a calling. And if you don't figure it out and you don't have tools to negotiate, you don't feel like you'll survive.
Right. And that calling doesn't stop.
No,
It
no, it
doesn't
actually
stop.
gets
It's going to
stronger.
keep calling until you finally pick up the phone and say, "All right, I surrender."
I tried to get back into the world, and I went and lived in Europe for a year, and I worked at a hotel, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
oh God.
Didn't work. I
Yeah.
tried to go back. I really thought if I could just go back in the mundane world and forget all this. But you know what? At some point, once you've tasted, once you can't unring the bell.
No, you can't.
Right.
Once you've had that taste of something, and that's what spiritual openings do. It's a tease. It gives us these experiences and these tastes of something so much more expansive, and that draws us. That creates the impetus for us to continue to want to search and grow. And for me, it's all inner work, because more deeply I refine my relative experience, the more profoundly clear and mature I'm going to be in my relationship to all these spiritual experiences that I'm having.
I
Right.
love
And
that. I
that's
have to
my
tell
big,
you, for me, it's refreshing to have a conversation with somebody who speaks my language.
that's, But you know what I'm, but you know how lonely it is.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know how when you're in that experience, I felt very alone. I felt very foreign.
Mhm.
Um, but again, I look back and I'm like, okay, but to have everything opened at once and then spend, the next 15 years learning how to integrate it. And someone was, "Well, when did you get to the point where you felt integrated?" I'm like, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, not there
Like
yet.
it's as long as we're
Not
in a
there
human
yet.
as long as we're in a human body, we're going to be continuing the journey of self-evolution, whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
I just say, why would you want to be? You might as well ride the wave than be trounced on the beach by the wave. So if you're in it, you might as well just surrender and accept the fact that you're being called in this thing and embrace it. Because I tried everything else. Ultimately, embracing it was the wisest choice, the easiest choice, and the least painful. And I didn't, at some point, there's a hunger inside of you that never goes away now. And that spiritual longing is what continues to draw you deeper into yourself.
Yes, sir.
So it was quite a
Absolutely.
ride. It was quite a ride. And I mean, I'm profoundly grateful. I don't think I could have articulated until I was in my late 20s exactly what had been the catalyst for this opening. I did know that it took a lot to navigate, and I mean, there's some things that have happened over the years, but it's been easier. Now it's just I have a whole bunch of things in place so that I can function in the world. So and time is one of those things. I'm not good with time. Like
Yeah.
I work really hard at it. Bobby knows, she fits in my classes. I lose track of time very easily. Sometimes I wake and someone said to me, "Do you ever like wake up?" And I'm like, often, like regularly, probably. And I think this is a byproduct of the experience. When I wake up from sleeping, I wake up and I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. And sometimes it takes a couple minutes for me to coagulate back into the body and to this relative experience and go, right, this reality, this is what I am, this is where I am. Because sometimes I wake up, I don't know who I am, where I am, or what day it is. I look over and I'm like, oh my God, there's a woman laying beside me. Oh, that's my wife. Okay, okay.
Oh
Then
God. Yeah.
it's kind of like the content downloads back into the avatar of the human,
Pretty much
right?
on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And very
So I
often
mean,
when I wake up, my first thought is, okay, what day is it and where am I?
where am I? And who am like, I don't know, because when you have access to all different realities and different versions of yourself, and this is an interesting thing too about different multidimensional realities. Like people talk about it like, oh, I'm going to this space. I'm like, you're not going anywhere. You're just accessing the part of you that's already there, right? There's no
Yes.
traveling to this land. All you're doing is you're tapping in because you're a multidimensional being and you live in all realities. There's an aspect of you that lives in every reality. So when you travel to these different realms and places, all you're doing is tapping into the part of you that already exists there. So, I mean, for me, when that was really difficult when I was growing up, because I would flip between all these different places and I experienced different aspects of different things. So it took me a while to figure out how to navigate that.
I still
That's,
do.
I still do
I
it, but it's
still do.
easier. It's
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
It's well, I say easier. I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly. That's it. Thank you very much. Yes.
Not that I've got it all figured out. It's just that I'm more comfortable with the fluidity of that reality. And I've just become, after 40 years of it, I've learned to accept that that fluidity is just the way that I'm going to experience reality.
Right.
And now it's become an amazing tool because I can use all of the referencing of that material and that information and accessing all these different things as a foundation to assist a client or somebody when I'm working with them, because you just have more information available to you.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And my objective is to help people open up so that they can have a broader experience of the depths of this multidimensional human biomorphic experience that we're having.
Right.
It's kind of a trip. Like this whole human thing is a trip.
It is. And
And
have you found that when you have had an experience, the clients that are drawn to you have also had the similar experience?
I do have that experience. I mean, like you end up, it's just, that's kind of like you're putting out a particular energetic invitation. So you
Hmm.
radiate a specific kind of consciousness and an invitation based on your experiences. So people will be drawn to something that resonates to them. So there's some
Right.
simpatico together when you meet somebody, they align, they feel what you're feeling, or you speak their language in a way that they understand it. But because I've done so much inner work and so much time invested in really mapping my inner world and creating tools for people, a lot of people come to me and they're like, I want to change the way I'm experiencing myself. And I'm like, And I said, have you done any inner work? And let's be clear, when I say inner work, most people have very different versions of what inner work is.
Yeah.
For
And
me,
shadow
it's
work. Yeah.
shadow work. I mean, people say I'm doing shadow work. I'm like, what aspect of the shadow are you working on? And they go, I don't understand what you're asking. And I'm like, then you're not doing shadow work, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't
Thank you.
know what you're working on, if you're just, or inner child work, I'm like, are you working with the radiant inner child? Are you working with the wounded inner child? What aspect do you work? What part of that inner child are you working with? So that for me, that map was the thing that I saw missing in the spiritual world. Because when I asked people if they're going inside, they didn't have a vehicle or a way to think about it. So that's why I created the IRAM book, the Inner Relationship Archetypal Model. It was about mapping, and no map is perfect. Let's be clear.
Right.
Like, it's a guide to get people inside to start investigating their relationship with their own psychology. But here's the thing: every human being is fragmented. I hear this concept a lot about killing the ego, and that is the worst. In my opinion, that's the worst approach, because that's first of all, it's an adversarial approach to an aspect of your being. Why would you want to do that? For me, it's about integrating and understanding the fragmented relative structure of your personality, because that's the filter that you're going to look through everything. So I saw the biggest thing that was missing in the spiritual world was those tools. So I spent a lot of time. I needed to do the tools for myself to function. So the people that are drawn to me are often drawn to wanting to do deep inner work. And then because of my shamanic background and years, 20 years of meditation and studying, all of those pieces help people understand the different aspects of their consciousness. So we go in there and I give them tools. Give them tools on how to navigate and open up those things, because most people live a very limited experience of their potential. Not very many people reach the apex of the human experience. I'm not saying I have, but I mean, but I have an understanding that there's so much more, so I'm continually drawn to learn.
Same.
And
Same
so
here. Yeah.
so yes, people, a long-winded answer, but yes, people are drawn to me because of those experiences, but a lot of people are drawn to me because of the inner work. Because essentially, even though all these things are going on, all these magical, mystical, spiritual experiences, I still function as a very pragmatic being, because if you can't take that stuff and apply it into your life, then what good is it? Right?
Exactly. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
mean, chant the Vedic scriptures for 108 days. Great. How does it change you? How do you now apply that? How do we function in the world? Because for me, if you can't pragmatically use it to change the way you're experiencing this reality, then it's just theory. It hasn't been grounded as an integrated experience inside of you. And that's what I find with most of the spiritual world. There's a lot of wanting to have these phenomenal experiences, but when we talk about integration, the inner work, understanding how you tick, your conditioning, your wounded inner child, your shadow, your mature inner adult, your radiant inner child, that is what's going to give you the grounded tools to be able to receive, hold, and really integrate all those spiritual experiences you're having.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, as you were talking about that, is before we actually started recording and we were having the conversation about, weekend courses and that sort of thing. And, it's really for a lot of people, it's balancing between I am taking care of my physical life and I want to have these experiences, but I only have from 5 o'clock on Friday until 6 o'clock on Sunday. So what can you do for me in that 47 hours or whatever? And, I think that is partly a product of modern life, but
It is.
also it is a product of people not really understanding what it takes to reach that level. Or as we go deeper, we also expand, right? So what
Totally.
does it take to feel that expansion? You're not going to do it in 47 or 48 hours. You're just
No,
not going, it's just not going to
no.
work.
But
Yeah.
that's the difference between someone who has a curiosity and is dipping their toe in the water, and they're exploring and they're tasting and it's opening them up, as opposed to someone like me who it was a survival issue, right? Like, if I didn't do it, I didn't think I could function. So
Exactly.
that's a calling, and not everybody has a calling, which is totally okay. Because I mean, I don't have a calling to be a mechanic, but I have profound respect for mechanics, right?
Yes,
I think
sir.
I think that's magic. That's absolutely, people like, oh my God, the things you do is magic. I'm like, you know what's
Yeah,
magic? That my accounting, my mechanic can open my car, the hood of my car, listen, and tell me exactly what's not right. That's
that's
incredible.
magic.
That's
Yeah,
magic to me.
exactly. To me too.
So
Yes.
it's not a calling. If it's not a calling, that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with learning and growing. But for those of us who we don't have a choice, and someone said, "Well, it's a choice," and I'm like, "It's a choiceless choice. You can
Yeah.
choose not to, but there's a lot of pain involved if you try to resist what is." So, I
Thank you.
mean, I'm always like, I always call myself the reluctant shaman. It wasn't the path I was wanting. My ego wanted a different path. But now that I've accepted this, I've embraced it. It's filled with joy and expansion. And I want to create the containers for people to have the conversations that I didn't get the opportunity to have,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because there was nobody to talk to. Nobody, and everybody I talked to, they were like, not quite right. Something's going on with him.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if they haven't, it is that thing though. Like if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to understand it.
yeah.
It's and we can equate that to anything. I've never experienced driving a car at 200 miles an hour, but I'll bet it's pretty thrilling for the person behind the wheel. You know,
Absolutely.
I can
If you like
appreciate
that
that
sort of thing.
if you like that sort of thing, but a lot of people aren't because it was a calling. It wasn't a group call. It wasn't a conference
Yep.
call. It was a calling, and
Yep.
so it's really one of those things where if you like you're talking and I'm going, yep, I totally relate. I love that somebody else is speaking my language. But for a lot of people who are listening, they're like, oh, that would be cool to experience, but they're not willing or able or being called to put that level of self-honesty really into it.
Eventually, I mean, listen, this world, it's happening around us regardless. I just
Mhm.
chose to consciously engage with the process
Yeah,
because I didn't
same.
see, if you look at it, I don't see, it seems to be the easiest choice. And it creates the outcome of me being engaged with the process of self-development, self-healing. There's no choice. It's going to happen anyways. So it's happening to me, and it's unraveling. So I might as well have a conscious relationship with it rather than an unconscious relationship with it, because at the very least, then I can navigate it with some level of clarity.
Yeah.
And so I think the other thing that happened, and this is not something we talk about a lot in the spiritual world, but consciousness is made up of two factors. It's made up of the absolute. If you look at like Hindu teachings, we talk about Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is like the absolute, the non-manifest, right? That's what I tapped into. I went through that in order to access to pop out into another world, and then you come back into the relative, which is Shakti. That's all of the relative is activity. So consciousness is made up of the absolute, which is beyond the manifest, which is pure emptiness, which is
Mhm.
complete neutrality. And then it's made up of the activity of the relative world, the energetics, the emotions, all the human stuff. So most people, when they go into the spiritual world, they're not necessarily accessing, they don't know that there's two consciousness made up of these two things. It's this duality that we live in. And so they end up living in the relative, but they don't go deeper into the experience of the absolute. But you don't know what that is until you've had it, until you've
Exactly.
touched and tasted something like that. Because the thing is people like, oh, when you're there, you're there. No, you have this deep, profound experience of beyond manifest. It's only when you come back that you recognize that you've been somewhere. So,
And
I
there's
mean, when
still
I
no
work with,
language for it.
there's still no language for it. And we're
Yes.
doing our very best with our limited human language to describe it. And it never is going to come close. I
Mm-mm.
mean, it's impossible for the mind to wrap itself around the experience of the ultimate, the unlimited of God. I mean, you could point to it, you could talk about your direct experience, which is the powerful thing, because if you could directly experience it and then you can articulate and learn how you navigate it, then at some point you'll come up with you'll be able to articulate a little bit. But for the most part, it's not just about knowing, it's about integrating, experiencing. And once you've experienced, then you have to apply that knowledge and then learn how to refine your relationship to it. So that
Right.
was my journey. It's always been my journey. It's what I help people with. And have the spiritual experiences, have the openings, but also take the time to do integration, to do the inner investigation, to see how does this change the way I relate to all the different parts of my own being and everybody in the outer world.
I think
because
a lot of people skip
it's an
that
inside
part.
job.
Yeah.
It's
I think
that's
a
the
lot of
hard
people
work.
skip,
Hard
yeah,
That's
work.
the hard
Yeah.
work.
yes, people skip the integration process, and that is the hard work. It's also, when I'm talking to some of my students, my classes, whatever, and they want to understand, they're trying really hard to understand, but they need labels to understand, and I have not found an accurate label for that experience.
It's all it's the closest pointing we have. We can put it in the closest container as long as we realize that the description and the container will never encompass the experience. At least we have something to use to point towards it.
Yes,
Because otherwise it's this untouchable thing that can't really be really kind of in the relative world, it's not an understood thing.
right.
So again, we do our best as human beings to use the language. And so for me, it's important. Language is important. The way we talk about it, what we say. And so Bobby, you've seen me with and people would use certain phrases. I'm like, can I invite you to think about that in a different way?
Yeah.
Because we're conditioned, the way we think, the way we're culturally conditioned, we're conditioned by our families, we have patterns. So that filters and colors our perception. So it's really important for us to, as we become more sophisticated in our direct experience of consciousness, we ultimately want to also become more sophisticated in our ability to articulate what's going on.
Mhm.
And again, if you're not teaching it, because I learned a lot through teaching, you have to learn how to articulate it to explain it. And that's the invitation that I get with my clients and my students and the classes, because people ask questions and I'm like, okay, this is a new way that I can articulate this based on their consciousness to give them an understanding or at least an invitation so they can taste something more.
Yes,
So, so I mean, language is necessary, but it's not, it falls short.
right. It's necessary, but somewhat limited. So,
And we have to just, as long as we can accept that
mhm.
in the relative human experience, that that's the case, then we can be okay with that. I've kind of let go and I'm like, it's never going to be quite right. Like as an artist, right? You have a vision of a painting that you want to do in your head. And then I had a teacher in art school who had said, the path between the concept of when it comes in your inner eye and the path for it to go down your arm through the pencil into the page, it's going to change as it comes into form. You have two choices. You can judge what's coming out and have a critique about what's happening, or you can embrace the transformation that happens and appreciate and refine your relationship. But you will never take the perfection of that vision in your head and be able to translate it with ultimate perfection in this relative world. It's just not translatable. But you could
Right,
do your best, and that's all we're doing as human beings. We're doing our best to express the experience that we're having in all these different places. So that's, for me, language is important. It's never going to be enough, but I mean, I have to use something. Like,
right,
and then, language itself is a container because the energy and the transmission that goes through that language ultimately can be far more important than the actual language.
right. And I've had students who are like, can you just like bulk and mind meld me and let me see? But then you would miss the journey. And the journey is really where it's all at. That's where the individual growth comes from, is that journey. Regardless of how it happens, that's where it is for you. My journey isn't going to give you what you need.
I mean, it's a reference point. It can be an
Mhm.
inspiration.
Yes.
It can help give people insight and clues and breadcrumbs. But ultimately, it's the your own journey that is going to open you up. And in my world, I call that the direct experience because for me,
Mhm.
direct experience is key. But direct experience has two pieces. There's the experience of it, and then you integrate it by being able to understand what happened. So someone said to me, "I don't understand what happened. I can't talk about it." I'm like, try because your process of integration will help you integrate that into your physical body. So
Mhm.
for me, I mean, you're going to hear this till the day I die. I'm an advocate for journaling because as you journal and you investigate and you observe it teaches you observation. It teaches you personal observation of the different parts of you, but you can start to articulate in a safe place the things that are going on with you. And then as you learn from teachers, you get clues and ideas so that you can go deeper. So yes, the direct experience for me is key. But again, direct experience without integration never becomes part of you. It's
Right.
not a living, alive direct experience. You're not an embodiment of what you know. And a lot of people, it's head. Because when we start the process, we want to understand, and it becomes this thing where we understand what's going on, but people haven't necessarily experienced it. So there's two things in the spiritual world. There's the experiencers who do all the experiences but don't integrate, and then there's the people who do all the reading and understand, but they don't have the direct experiences. The key is to marriage those two together.
Right.
Because ultimately
integration.
that's the only way you're going to create integration. That's how you're going to integrate your your egoic reality, because you don't want to kill the ego, you want to integrate it. You want to integrate the filter. Why would we judge the actual human filter that's required for connection? Right? We need an individual human egoic personality to be a living relative human being. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just about how your relationship to that ego functions. If you have an unconscious relationship, then that's running you and you don't even know it. The more conscious your relationship, the more refined you're going to be in your relationship to your spiritual experiences. So for me, it's a very practical thing. I'm not saying that I do breath work with people and we do shamanic experiences. Bobby's been through some of the experiences we've done in the different classes. So I'm not against phenomena, but I am pro integration. Learn who you are, figure out how you tick, because that's what's going to function in the world, right?
Right.
I mean, if it's fine if you're not going to be in the world and you want to go out and be a yogi in the cave, that's totally fine. I mean, I've done that. I lived a year in the forest. And ultimately, at some point, I'm like, this is not the highest use of this consciousness that's coming through me to be alone in the middle of nowhere. I feel called to share this.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting in India. I have a teacher, we talked about this. He's like, what they do, and they take the yogi, and the yogi goes off into the mountains and does all these deep and profound meditation practices. And the guru and the master comes, instructs, and kind of checks in with the yogi, or the shaman checks in with the yogi, and they're doing this process, and they refine their consciousness through all of these alchemical tools and these kriyas and all these different pieces, which I've studied. And then the next part of that, which then we'll talk about, is they take the chela, the student, and they tell the student, you need to go back to the village of your birth as a beggar, and you need to sit in your town in humility as a beggar. And it's that when you come back into the world, that's when you learn how much you've actually integrated, how much and what you think you've learned versus what you've actually learned. So when the rubber meets the road, the practical application is the test of how much mastery you actually have.
Right. I had a similar experience with doing I can't think of the English word, Hambaleche. It's a vision quest. Vision quest. That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. In the Lakota format, where there is a lot of preparation for it, and there's
Absolutely.
a lot of prayer to go into it. It's not just, okay, I'm going to wander off in the woods for a few days. It's not that at all.
No, there's a sacred container around it.
Absolutely, there's a sacred container around it. But I had not heard that about that practice in India, but it sounds exactly like the practice in the Native American cultures.
It's exactly. It's a deep and profound. Listen, a lot of the traditions in India are shamanic.
Yeah.
Listen, we use the word shamanic a lot. Like we're throwing this word around. What does it actually mean, right? When we say shamanic, it's elemental. It's an elemental relationship. It's an intimate relationship with the elemental experience, which is the relative experience of our earth. Like our earth. Someone often said to me, what's the most profound experience of God you can have? I'm like, your connection to the earth. It's the physical representation of because it's unconditional. The earth is unconditional in its love for us. So as a shamanic person, you're accessing the experience of the divine through the elements, right? And that's an alchemist. An alchemist also uses the elements and transforms those elements through practices into something else. Lead to gold, that's alchemy. Unconsciousness into consciousness, unawareness into awareness. That's all the alchemy. And a shamanic practitioner is one who's using the elemental experience of the divine, physical divine representation of Mother Earth as the way to ground, because we are made of that. So that's a very powerful way to access this depth of our experience, not only as a human, but develop this vehicle so that we can be a better receiver for a profound experience of something else.
Right.
So when we hear people use the word shamanic, I'm like, also there are many different kinds of shamanic practices. There's
Yeah.
herbal, there's metaphysical, there's people who are help people pass over and cross over in multi dimensions and other realities. There's a whole so in my tradition, in the Algonquin tradition, my great grandfather, he was the shaman of the tribe. There's different flavors of what a shaman can be. So we use this big term, right? So for me, like um, um, Chinese medicine, it's an elemental based tradition.
Yes.
The whole Ayurvedic, elemental based, right?
Mhm.
But if you look at the modern medicine, not elemental based,
No.
right? Not elemental based. So I feel like one of our profound connections to this reality is through the earth. That's the elements. And so why as a shamanically means I'm having this intimate relationship with my reality and all the elements, and I'm using the skills and tools and the consciousness to be the alchemist to transform. And I'm there's a devotion to Divine Mother Earth as the one that provides everything so I can sustain myself, right? So for me, when we talk about that, we say shamanic, people often they don't track what that means, but it's extremely sophisticated. If you look at the traditions, the medicine wheels, the way people open space, the sacredness in the relationship. I mean, without the earth, without food, without being able to tap into the elements, we don't survive. We don't
Right.
function in this vehicle. So
Right.
I don't know. It's always fascinating to me that we have such a deeply profound uh, dishonoring of the Divine Mother. So as a spiritual being, I am a profound devotee of Divine Mother. Divine Mother, and that's just and that I mean that's an I know it's an archetype, but it represents the level of nurturing that Divine Mother as Earth provides for us. And if you
Yes.
look at the way we treat Earth, it's
Oh,
horrific.
gosh.
It's horrific. And it's
Yeah.
deeply unconscious,
Yeah.
right? So that shamanic organic functioning, which is probably the most aligned thing that any of the cultures on earth ever had, is for me a very powerful entry point to have a deep relationship with not only your consciousness, this physical body, but also the divine in physical form, always providing an unconditional experience of support.
Mhm.
Wasn't it what when we were talking before we started recording, when we should have been recording, and you said something about you don't think that humans are from Earth because who would treat their home like this? I completely agree
That's
with you.
true.
I have been saying that for years, and people look at me like I have three heads. I don't care.
It's a radical idea, but if you look at every other being, like let's just look at it purely empirically, right? Like a
Mhm.
purely observational. There is no other being, physical being, on this planet at this moment that destroys its own ecosystem except for humans.
Right.
You won't see a bear destroy its own ecosystem, right? You don't see a rabbit destroy its own ecosystem. We're the only creature. So if that's the case, we've been given somehow we have this access to free will, which is this ability to manipulate our environment, right? But we have not proven ourselves to be good stewards of
No.
anything. And I know the awareness of that is powerful to continue to invite people to be more aligned. But we in our modern world, we're becoming less and less connected to our earthly our mother,
Right.
right? To the foundation of what we're made of. Like we are part of that structure and that system. And human beings are not only insane, they're not good stewards, and we're extremely arrogant to think that somehow we are beyond all the other creatures on this planet. So
Right.
yes, I would say from that perspective, it makes sense that somehow there's a part of us that's not from here, or else we couldn't do what we do to this planet. Because a dog doesn't have the way a will works and a consciousness works in an animal. They don't have the capacity to live outside of being in alignment with the organic function. They don't have the ability. We do. How did we get that ability? Right? How
Right.
do we get that ability to be able to manipulate and defy the very ecosystem that's supporting us? It's not only insane, but it does make me think that there is an aspect of how we were created that's not entirely from here.
I would agree with you. Like I said, I've been saying it for years. And people look at me like I have three heads. But I agree with you because no sane creature
No,
Destroy their own ecosystem.
there's no creature. We have not seen any proof on the planet of any other creature that will do this except for us. So
Right.
that shows that there might be a part of us that's foreign, that's not from here, that has been integrated, or I mean, we can come up with all the theories. I have a whole bunch of ideas and
Oh, yeah.
experiences, having met and experienced so many different kinds of beings from different realities. It makes the version of what we think we are is fairly limited in our perception. We are far more than
Agreed.
we ever can imagine. And so
Yeah.
if that's the case, we're stardust,
Mhm.
right? We're mostly space. In like even in our molecular structure, we're mostly space.
Mhm.
And it's non-linear. The way space works in our bodies, football fields, a space between atoms. How does that make sense in a linear world? So there's a whole experience of non-linear functioning and otherworldly functioning that is somehow integrated and programmed into this human vehicle that's not entirely from here. I fully believe that.
I
And I've had
fully agree
experience
with you.
once you've had experiences with different beings, you recognize
Yes.
in the grand scheme of all the galaxies and cosmoses and universes that exist out there, we are a very small part of creation.
Mhm.
It would be good for humans to be a little more humble about that. And then maybe we would treat our Earth and our ecosystem a little different. Maybe our consciousness and the way we treat each other would be different. Maybe our relationship to the universe and ourselves might be a little more respectful.
Right. I agree.
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe.
Or maybe we'll just keep going on unconsciously like we have been for as long as I can even
But
comprehend.
but what's interesting about that is, someone said to me, "Well, I'm waiting for the world to evolve into this really utopia," and I don't think it's ever going to happen, to be honest with you. And I don't say that to be a Debbie Downer, but we need the rub of this relative experience to challenge us into a deeper experience of ourselves. So if it was utopia, there would be no challenge for us to grow.
Right.
Right.
So we're here in this plane, in this reality, in this human body. To me, it's a grand experiment, and there's an opportunity for the only thing. Remember, when you cross over, the only thing you take with you is your consciousness,
Yeah.
right? You don't take your ego, you don't take your money, you don't take your possessions, you don't take your status, you don't even take your personal identity of who you think you are. What the only thing that comes with you when you cross over is the consciousness on this side is the consciousness you wake up on the other side. And that was a big eye opener for me, because when I was on the other side, I was still fundamentally at the same level of evolution that I was when I was in the relative, but there was clarity. So when I came back, I'm like, okay, now I want to get that clarity back. I want to find how I find that clarity internally, and understanding that, the only thing that I will ever be able to take with me into the next experience is the evolved consciousness that I create within, using the human experience to do that. So if you think about it that way, then I mean, we're putting our value system on things that are absolutely not important,
Right.
Right. Well, and
right?
we
I
have
mean,
been for a long time.
Yeah.
and so I think I do feel like that unconsciousness is the fodder that actually inspires us to want more. Because if it was utopia and everyone was living in total bliss, would we be challenged to actually do the inner work that's required? I mean, what challenges people to grow?
Pain.
Uncomfortableness,
Yeah.
pain,
Yeah.
right? Pain. You don't change until most people don't change until it's so you have no other choice.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I can speak from experience. I wouldn't have done what I did if I wasn't in pain. I wouldn't have done the exploration the way I've done it if I
Yeah.
wasn't forced to do it in some way. If I didn't feel like if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to function. So we need the rub of the shadow and the unconsciousness to wake us up. So it was interesting. I had a teacher talk about this, and it was interesting the way he framed it. He's like, "Can you, when the room and the lights are on in the room, and all the lights are on in the room, and you light a flame in that room. How bright is that flame in comparison when the lights are off?" Right? So because we're living in this Kali Luga, this dark 25,000-year cycle of unconsciousness, right? This is the optimal time to wake up, because it is so apparent, because we're living in darkness and
Mhm.
unconsciousness. When you light that flame, you can see it so much more clearly. So in a sense, we're given the best tools possible to challenge us to become the best versions of our divine selves and our human selves.
And are you seeing this happen overall in society? I guess what I'm asking that because I'm looking at this from as a parent of a 20 something.
Too.
And
I have a couple of kids, 22 and 20 and 22.
yeah, mine will be 24 soon. So 23, 24. And looking at, well, working with the people that I work with, I go into a psychic fair or an expo. People come and sit down in the chair. I don't know them ahead of time. I haven't vetted
Right.
anybody. I don't, any of that. What I'm getting though is a lot of younger adults who are saying, I don't want a McMansion. I don't see any point in working my whole life to gather a bunch of stuff to hand it off to somebody else when I die. They're looking at living more simply, tiny homes. And, I've talked to
An
several who are,
experience.
yes,
Experience.
they're more into experience now,
Yeah.
which is that's hopeful for me. That's hopeful for me
It is
because they
hopeful.
are paying more attention to the environment. They are paying more attention to, we don't have to keep destroying our home. I'm seeing a
Yeah,
lot of that more consciousness.
this new generation has seen the effects of what our generation and the generation before us have done, and
Yes.
they're not willing. They're not
No.
We're not doing it. And maybe there's some kind of awakening that, like, oh my God, we're destroying our planet. Wait a second, we can't keep doing this.
Right.
Hopefully that's the case. I'd like to think that, but I do see that the new this generation, like in the 20 generation, because both my children, there's a depth of awareness in terms of their relationship, and their value system is completely different.
Oh
They
yeah.
just, even like, I'll give you an example, like even like, COVID was good in the sense, but what it did do was it told the way the functioning of how things were, like having to go in the office 9 to 5, right? That's not a thing anymore. Because
Right.
Right.
both of my kids who are now getting job offers, and they're like, all the job offers are hybrid, because they can't keep proving that you have to be in the office, because for 3 to 4 years people have been as productive, if not more productive, at home. So some of those structures that have
Yes.
been defined and people bought into, this generation's like, we don't buy into that. We've had experiences that prove otherwise. We don't like, if you're the example of what has been aligned, then we don't agree with it, because look what you're doing to the planet and look what we've created.
Hmm.
So there is more awareness, there is more consciousness, there is a desire to have a different relationship, a more conscious relationship with everything around them. I do believe that. But when someone says, well, that's going to create a utopia, I'm like, I don't think it will.
Oh, I don't think
But
it's creating a
no,
utopia either,
No.
but I am hopeful that consciousness is opening up more, and even with the 20 somethings who are going, I'm not going to put up with an abusive employer.
no, they won't.
They
But
will not. And I think
I
that
love
is
that. I love
amazing
that.
growth.
I love
Yeah.
it. No, they're less seduced by the illusion
Hmm.
in some ways, right? And that's based on seeing that what we've been doing for past generations, which really has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. I
Yes.
mean, like the Roman Empire was like the epitome of debauchery, and completely at some point destroyed itself. We're on
Hmm.
that path. If we keep
Right.
going the way we're going, we're on that path,
Right.
right? So, I mean, some of them are like, "Hey, wake up! That is beautiful." I
Hmm.
love that about my both of my kids and that generation. And
Yeah.
I'm working with. There's a lot of young people that I end up working with, and I'm excited to see the level of interest in self evolution.
Hmm.
That is exciting to me. That is
Yeah.
exciting.
It is
And
exciting.
but we still need the relative duality of this dualistic world in order to change and grow, because we grow
Right.
through comparison, right? You don't really deeply understand the darkness until you have a taste of the light. You don't really have a profound humility for the depth of the light until you've experienced some of the depth of your own darkness. So
Right.
that duality helps us grow, if you use it that way. By the way, not everybody uses it that way,
Right.
but that's
Right.
a choice on how you want to perceive it.
Right. Right. This
But
sounds like a great natural stopping point because we're getting up to about an hour. We want to be
Right.
respectful of, I know, right? Like, where did that hour go?
Marcus is
Concept
just
of
getting
time, right,
started.
Marcus? I have the same issue with time concepts. So I actually wrote down the time so we could keep track of it. But I want, I would love you to share your information with people so that they can find out where you are, what you're up to, get a hold of you, find out what you have to offer. So
You mean like you want me to give you like I'll send you all the info so people can text, but people can access me through the member. I have a membership site. What I did was I took 10 or 15 years of content of all the different events and things that I've done, and I've kind of put it in this reservoir, and then so people can access information, because for me, I didn't have resources. So
Mhm.
for me, it's important to provide the containers and the opportunities and the invitations, sessions, events. I'm actually going to be in the Milwaukee area in what, 3 or 4 days. It's
Right.
like I'm going to be
Yep.
there on Tuesday or Wednesday. So
Nice.
there's a ton of events happening in various places and various locations. I do private sessions where I help people kind of navigate not only doing body work but also navigate some tools for inner work. And then there's all these deep meditation pieces, and then there's always lectures. So the way I function is I want to be able to give people an access of the mind, give them experience of energetics, help them deepen in their own process of their own evolution and their own different aspects of themselves, and then give them personal instruction. So like tapping into all the different aspects of consciousness to create a holistic invitation for a path to grow. So I'm going to be there, and they'll be happening, and people they can do remote sessions, they can do in-person sessions. I'm kind of open to how we connect, and I do a lot of coaching. There's a lot of people enter into coaching processes with me, and we'll continue. That's where we go deep into the process, and we start unraveling and getting pieces of your own internal work, so that you can kind of modify and refine your own experience so that it will change every relationship.
Right.
So those are the ways that people can connect with me, and you can find me through my website and follow me on social media and all those different places, which
Okay.
has become kind of important in this world now by the looks of it.
He- He's
Right.
become a
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah, it's different than me living in an ashram in the middle of nowhere for 11 years. That's now it's social media.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, we all kind of live on social media right now. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time, your energy. You've given some great explanations as far as language will allow. And I really appreciate that. For those of us who are, those of you who are watching, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. Let's make this more available to more people. You can also find us on our Facebook page at Breakfast with Bobby. It's a group page that you can join. And Bobby, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I've been kind of just listening to everything. It was fun watching the two of you interact. I didn't anticipate all of that, but it was phenomenal. And thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. You guys can access Markus's website, markuskasunich.com. Take a look at the events. He's in Milwaukee for probably 3 weeks or so.
Yeah,
There's
it's a little almost 3 weeks. Yeah.
there's something going on every night. If you haven't gone to anything that Markus has done, you're missing it. His website is worth every penny. His sessions are worth every penny. I've been to a number of his retreats. It's worth the time and effort. The growth of all of that is profound. His book is amazing. It will save you thousands in therapy and hours in trying to find a good psychiatrist. So check all of that out. Again, thank you so much for being here, Markus. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. Thank you for the
Thank
conversation.
you.
It's always a joy to be able to communicate, talk, and share at this level, and to just be open to be able to have the conversation. Thank you for providing the container for that. I really deeply appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank
Well, we
you.
love containers, you know.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thank you
Take
very
care,
much.
everyone.
And we'll see you next time.
All right.